Chatterbox Sports Studios. It's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
Well, good morning. Good morning. A pleasant good Tuesday morning inside our Chatterbox Studios right here in Hamilton, OHIO. You're trying that Zoom thing, Casey. It's pretty fancy. It's getting a lot of big compliments when you do that.
Well, I've been trying to do small improvements here and there, and that just happens to be
you
one
were
of them.
hard at work last night. We're going to talk about some of the research you were doing last night for some topics we're going to have covered here tomorrow. On your game.
Well, it's time to start stepping up our game.
This ex-professionals operation that we're running here. Paul, good morning. Casey, good morning. You guys doing well?
Doing well.
Yeah, Thom, how are you doing?
Beautiful, beautiful day outside. Lots of sunshine. Going to warm up a little bit. Sat in the freezing cold last night. Watched Marymount give Lakota West an absolute tail kicking. School 1/10 the size of Lakota West. Hang with them, boys. Hang with them. We welcome you to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I'm Thom Brennaman. As you know or may not know, we come your way Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time. You can find us a number of different ways on YouTube/Chatterbox Sports. We're also streaming live on Facebook on the Chatterbox Sports page and in podcast form. Just search Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman and you're dialed in. Well, the Xavier Musketeers back at it again on the practice court today down at the Cintas Center, getting ready for their biggest test of this NCAA tournament. Kennesaw State and Pitt are one thing. The University of Texas is quite another. Yes, X has wins over the likes of UConn and Creighton, two teams that are still alive in the Sweet 16. And yes, they beat Big East Conference champion Marquette once in 3 meetings. But they also have losses on neutral courts, which, of course, this will be in the Sweet 16, to the likes of Gonzaga, who's still alive, Duke, who is not. Texas this year has destroyed Gonzaga. They've destroyed Kansas. They beat Creighton very early in the year. Tip-off is Friday night, 9:45 p. The winner will face either top seed Houston or 5th seeded Miami. It is a done deal. We talked about it yesterday in the Big Apple. Rick Pitino is the new head coach at St. John's. Pitino, who won national championships at Kentucky and Louisville, the only coach, by the way, to have ever done so at 2 different programs in the history of the NCAA, signs a 6-year deal with the Johnnies. Ed Cooley, official as well. He's a new coach at Georgetown, leaving his hometown in Providence. And boy, he faces a massive rebuilding job. The Hoyas 13-50 over the last 2 years under Patrick Ewing. The women's tournament is down to its Sweet 16 as well. And the Ohio State Buckeyes advance with a 71-69 win over North Carolina last night. The Lady Buckeyes, a 3 seed, will meet number 2 seed and juggernaut UConn. That will be this Friday at 4. Miami of Florida. You actually watched the end of this game.
I did. Yeah, I watched this game. I watched the fourth quarter of this game. It was a great game. Miami, Florida won just before the buzzer, beat Indiana. That was at Assembly Hall.
And that is a number 9 seed, Miami, beating number 1 seed in that region, Indiana. In baseball, what a thriller. Japan gets a 2-run double in the bottom of the 9th inning to win in walk-off fashion at the World Baseball Classic. So it sets up tonight's showdown. For all the marbles, as the cliche goes, Team USA v. Japan. Shohei Ohtani has said that he might be pitching in that game in relief. Of course, he will be in the starting lineup as an offensive player. The title game is 7 o'clock tonight on FS1. NFL news. The Houston Texans, out of nowhere, made a huge splash in free agency yesterday, signing former Cowboys tight end Dalton Schultz and former Bills running back Devin Singletary to contracts, both on 1-year deals. Former league MVP Cam Newton, did you see this story? He will throw at Auburn's Pro Day. That's his alma mater. Newton sat out all of last season. And he says, quote, "Ain't no way there's 32 quarterbacks in the NFL better than me." He might be right.
Nah, I don't know about that.
He's only 34. He's in great shape. He's healthy. I mean, you look at some of the stiffs playing quarterback in the NFL today. I mean, seriously. At the very minimum, I'll tell you right now, at the very minimum, depending on how he looks at that pro day, if I were the Bengals, now if he's expecting to be a starter, that rules him out. But if I'm the Bengals, I like Cam Newton a hell of a lot more than Brandon Allen.
Not a good locker room guy fit for our squad.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I've been around Cam Newton a lot. I don't agree with that as long as he's okay being a backup. The danger you get into, and there's no way Cam Newton, there's no way in his mind that he believes he would start over Joe Burrow or should start over Joe Burrow. But if all of a sudden something were to happen with Joe Burrow, you mean to tell me, Casey McAllister, you feel more confident winning games with Brandon Allen than you might with Cam Newton?
I mean, if Cam Newton was on our roster for the whole spring training and whatnot, but as that stands right now, Brandon Allen knows the system at least. And
yes,
knows
he
the
does.
Guys, and I'd rather take familiarity than uncertainty. But I won't sit up here and say that Cam Newton wasn't a great player. I mean, if he truly is back to being healthy and can throw, I think a team should consider him. You know, like if things fall through with Aaron Rodgers for the Jets, I mean, I wouldn't hesitate to pick up the phone and give him a call and see what he says, because that team's ready. It's ready to win now. It's built to win now, in my opinion. But we'll get into that maybe some other time.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit tomorrow.
Yeah.
A little bit tomorrow because of all the research you put together overnight. And we're going to be talking with Brian Billick today about what's going on with this whole Lamar Jackson thing. It's been over a week. Now, they tend to keep everything very close to the vest, so we don't know if there are teams that have actually talked to him about a long-term deal or offering him a contract. And the whole Aaron Rodgers thing with Brian Billick. We have Tracy Jones coming up at 11:30. But we have the Hall of Famer Marty Brennaman first and foremost right out of the gate. Dad, good morning. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Tom. Nice to see you, my boy. And Casey, is Paul there now?
I am. I'm here. How are you?
Hey, Paul. How are you?
Fantastic.
Paul's been hobnobbing, Dad, with all the, the highfalutins of the NCAA, your good friends at the NCAA, down there in Greensboro following the Xavier Musketeers.
Well, there's some people that like to hobnob with the big wheels of the NCAA. I'm not a big fan of that organization. I don't kiss their ass like a lot of people do. Most hypocritical organization on the face of the earth. But if Paul enjoys hobnobbing with people like that, God bless him.
Marty, I got to say, I hadn't been to the Greensboro Coliseum, and I know, obviously, all the history there with the ACC. It was great walking back around, like, in the locker room area and in the media area and everything, and they had all the newspaper headlines from, all the old days of Duke, North Carolina, and all the signatures on the wall. It was a cool experience.
Well, it's a far cry, Paul, from what it was, originally. I mean, they've added a second deck to that thing. It doesn't even really resemble what it looked like when it was first built. But there have been some memorable, iconic basketball games played in that facility. Probably none better than NC State in Maryland in a championship game in the early 70s in the NCAA for the right to go to the NCAA tournament. Probably the greatest single all ACC game ever played. But it's a special area down there. There's no question about that.
Well, Millie's running around there wanting a little bit of attention, apparently wanting some kind of voice in this discussion.
Yeah, well, she's going on the floor. Okay. All right.
All right, hey, I got to ask you, first of all, how your bracket's doing? You picked a lot of upsets. How many teams do you know, if you looked at it, do you have left in the Sweet 16? Paul and Casey have 8. I have 7. We have Casey has 2 Final Four teams left. Paul and I have 3 left, right? Yeah. How about you?
I don't really know because I've given up on the thing. I'm not interested in looking at it anymore. You're talking about upset. I've been upset. No, Nobody's better at it, I can tell you that, than my wife. She's on top of it now. She's got all 4 of her Final Four teams still alive. She's probably got 7 or 8, maybe even more than that, as far as in the Sweet 16 is concerned.
Casey,
I have no idea. I have 1 Final Four team no longer there, but I've got 3 still alive.
Okay, Casey, you said you had 3 and not 2.
No, I was saying that Marty has 3.
Marty has
I was
3.
pulling up his old bracket.
Okay.
How many finals of the Sweet 16 do I have left, Casey, since you know so much?
I'm going to look at it right now and double check.
Okay.
Well, he was kind enough to take a picture of your that you sent us of your bracket. And so Casey's going to take a look at that, and he'll chime in here in a second, unless you have it right now, Casey. You trying to add them up? You use your fingers and toes over there? Is that what you're doing? No math in public on this show?
Yes, I'm trying to just double check.
Okay. But your impressions of the tournament. I mean, it's been everything that when they coined the term March Madness, it's been everything you could ask for.
It's been unlike, I think, any NCAA tournament that I can remember. With all the upsets that have been that have taken place, you always have upsets. You'll never avoid that. But to have as many as we've had, and to have the overall number 1 seed knocked out of the thing, and I think once again it points up what everybody has said 1,000,001 times every season at this time of year. There's nothing like the NCAA tournament. I mean, I work World Series and. I can't compare this event, and that includes the blasted Super Bowl and the NBA Finals and all the rest of it. There's nothing of a sustaining nature that can even compare to what goes on in the month of March in college basketball.
All right, we're closing down to opening day. We were ribbing Paul a little bit about hanging out with all the muckety-mucks from the NCAA. You, meanwhile, were hanging out with all the muckety-mucks, if you will, up at the Castellini Estate in Paradise Valley, Arizona. You were out there in red spring training. What was the vibe out there like? I couldn't resist. You know that. I couldn't resist that.
I know that. It was very nice. I saw the team play 3 times, not 9 innings, because I don't have to go to 9 innings anymore, and I don't do it. But I saw them play an appreciable number of innings over 3 games, and the weather was great, and the hospitality was as good or better, and it was a nice trip. It really was. We were out there about 10 days, and the last day was the worst day weather-wise. We left out of there the day before yesterday to go to the airport and fly home. It was 62 degrees and cloudy and windy and just a miserable day. But we had many days in which the temperature was over 80, and that's the kind of baseball weather you look forward to in Arizona this time of year.
Well, we're less than, 9-10 days away, something like that, from opening day. Look, nobody's given the Reds a chance, and I'm not here to say that they should be given a chance. But the bottom line is, it's an old cliche, but you never know until you roll the ball out there and see what happens. Hunter Green looks like he's throwing the ball very well. Nick Lodolo's throwing the ball very well. Graham Ashcraft, his last start, throwing the ball very well. I don't know where they are on the 4 and 5 spots in the rotation, but at least as far as spring training goes, and whatever that counts for, I don't know, not much probably, but at least you've got guys that are giving you the kind of results that you want to see or you're happy to see, right?
Well, the big 3 are. You just mentioned them. And all 3 of them have pitched well in spring training to certainly increase the optimism among Reds fans insofar as those 3 are concerned. I don't really think that they are as any close to being settled in number 4 and 5 in the rotation than they were 2 weeks ago. The guys, Brandon Williamson, I think, is probably the young man that is the closest to being tabbed as one of those 2 remaining spots in the rotation. But other than that, Connor Overton and some of the other, the Sessa kid who was away playing in the World Baseball Classic and just came back and apparently threw the ball very well either Sunday or yesterday, one of the 2 days that we have not seen since coming home. But I still think those 2 spots are unsettled, and I really believe the bullpen right now is nothing to write home about at all. I mean, that's the one area that I thought would be maybe the most improved on the ball club. And now with the unavailability of T.J. Antone and Lucas Sims, who apparently is continuing to have back problems, they were the two guys that I was counting on to come back this year and pitch the way they have in the past. And if they had been able to do that, and if they are able to do that, whenever it might be, then I think the bullpen will be improved. But as of now, I really have great concerns about how that bullpen is going to work out.
Have you been watching any of the WBC? And if so, what do you think about it?
I just watched it last night. I watched the game between Japan and Mexico, and I thought it was sensational. I mean, it was a great baseball game. And Tom, I got to be honest with you. I don't think the majority of people in this country, even those who are baseball fans, really care about the World Baseball Classic. When we paid attention, because when we were in Arizona, the first round of the WBC was being played in Chase Field in Phoenix, where the Diamondbacks play. And, they had sellout crowds, but they had sellout crowds when the Latin American countries played, and the great majority of people in that ballpark were people pulling for whether it be Mexico or the Dominican Republic or whoever it might be. I really don't believe the people in this country care about it one way or the other. I really don't.
Well, I mean, look, the case has been made, and accurately so, that when you've got all these, especially from a pitching perspective, for Mark DeRosa, the manager of the American team, and his pitching coach, Andy Pettitte, that when you've got all these stipulations, and it's understandable while they're there, but it seems like when you have all these different, not with your lineup, I mean, your lineup is a juggernaut lineup, but the pitching part of it, with all the things you have to do, I mean, you're really not in it to win it. They're going to play in a title game tonight, and that's great, but you're not all in to win it like some of these other countries are.
Like all the rest of the countries are.
Right.
Not some of them.
Right.
But it does boil down to pitching. It has nothing to do with the starting eight that Mark DeRosa or Benji Gill or any of the other managers put on the field. It all has to do with pitching and the constraints that are leveled against the pitchers to protect them from an MLB team standpoint. And I understand that. But as long as that type of thing exists, then I don't think that people really care about whether or not the United States wins that event or not. Now, if you got your Hammers pitching and whoever it might be pitching tonight in the championship game, it sure as heck wouldn't be Adam Wainwright. That wouldn't be the case. As opposed to Japan, who is either going to have Darvish pitching or Shohei Ohtani. I mean, right. Let's compare the situations. It's understandable maybe why people don't get pumped up, but that's just the way it is. And I think that feeling is going to exist among people that were born and raised in the United States as long as the constraints are placed on the U.S. team and those guys that are Major League Baseball players. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
All right. I don't know if you saw the story. I know you're a big fan of The Athletic, the website. We talk about him frequently here, even though I'm just like everybody else and paying a subscription. As much as I talk about him, I probably ought to get it for free. But
you should.
Your former good friend, Jim Bowden, former general manager of the Cincinnati Reds, he had a long conversation. Perk up now, perk up. He had a long conversation, apparently, with Reds general manager Nick Krall. And this was certainly a big story yesterday in The Athletic. I know you saw it.
No, I didn't see it.
What's that?
Go ahead. I did not see that.
Okay, well, Nick Krall apparently shared with Jim Bowden that he wants Joey Votto to finish his career as a Red. That's priority number one. But, he said, if Votto were to come to him and request a trade to Toronto, his hometown team, that he would certainly do everything he could to make that happen. Does that surprise you? Never heard Nick Krall say that before. And Joey Votto didn't just all of a sudden open up the newspaper or the internet and read that out there like it was the first time. I mean, there had to be at least some conversation with Krall and Votto to say, hey, look, if I'm asked about this, this is what I'm going to say, so you're not surprised or caught off guard by it.
Well, that doesn't really surprise me, Thom. I mean, is it not logical to think whether or not it's real or not? But it's certainly a touch of logic to think that here's the young man who's had an incredible big league baseball career, who is a native of Toronto, Canada, or at least the suburb of Toronto, was a Blue Jays fan as a young man, a kid growing up. It's not illogical to think that that topic would be discussed. Whether or not a conversation has taken place between Joey and Nick, and whether or not, if it has, that situation will ever come up. I don't know. But no, I'm not surprised at all that the possibility that a conversation took place that would prompt Nick to say what he said to Jim Bowden in that piece in The Athletic.
I just wonder, Dad, at the end of the day, and look, in no way, shape, or form am I going to sit here and be judge and jury on any of this stuff. Because, look, most players you talk to, in a perfect world, they would start their career and end their career with the same team. The two of the biggest names in Reds history had a chance to do it in Johnny Bench and Barry Larkin. Joey Votto is in the final year of a contract. Larkin had a chance to play for a World Series champion. Johnny Bench played on a couple of World Series champions. Joey Votto, unless there's a miracle upon all miracles, will not play for a World Series champion as a Cincinnati Red, at least not if it ends this year. So, would you be surprised if Votto would all of a sudden say, man, I'm getting near the end. He said he doesn't want to quit playing, but I'm getting near the end here, and I do want to go play for a contender, because I don't think it's going to happen here. I'm sure he's had that chance over the last couple of years, and that has not happened, whether he asked for it or whether the Reds were trying to make a deal and it never happened and we don't know about it.
I'm not so sure the club's ever tried to trade him to begin with. Secondly, I don't know that. Why would Joey go to him now when he hasn't done it yet? That's been one of the things that, quite honestly, I've been a bit critical about, because I think when you have had the kind of career that he's had, and it's been fairly clear that a world championship team is not going to be in his future wearing a Cincinnati Reds uniform, I would have gone to the club before now and said, I've had a wonderful career here. I've loved playing in this town. I've been accepted unlike anything I could have ever dreamed of in my greatest dreams. But at the same time, I want one legitimate shot. Do me a favor if you can and work out a deal and send me to a team that has a chance of going to the World Series. And I really don't care which team it is. I certainly have the right to veto any trade, which he does in his contract. But I would like to have that happen. And I think that should have happened before now. I don't think Joey has, and I can't say this with any degree of certainty because we've never talked about it, but I don't know why he would not have done what I just said long before now. And if he's going to do it, or if he had have done it, he would have done it before now, because quite honestly, I don't know what his market value is now. You're talking about a guy making $25 million a year with a $7 million buyout next year, and if the club accepts the option, they pay him $20-some million more. Who in the heck's going to take that kind of contract on? I mean, really,
unless he just knocks the cover off the ball over the first half of the season. That's the only way that's going to happen. It could have happened 2 years ago when he had a good year, but the Reds, stumbled into what's that?
I disagree with what you just said. I don't care if he bats .280 this year and hits 25 home runs and drives in X number of runs. I don't think there's a team out there that's going to take on a $25 million contract in 2024. I simply do not.
No. I'm with you on 2024. I'm with you on that one. But I'm saying if he's hitting 280 and he has 15 home runs and he has, 45, 50 runs batted in by the time you hit July, and he really looks good at the plate. I mean, take Toronto, just pick them as an example. Right. They've got Guerrero, who's their regular guy, but then they brought in Brandon Belt. Belt's been a good player for a long time, but if all of a sudden you catch lightning in a bottle with Votto, and they just say, hey, look, now instead of $25 million for the rest of this year, it's only costing me $13.5 or $12.5 million. And, Reds will split the buyout for you at the end of the year. Who knows? Or maybe some big money team that can afford to do it, not for 24, but just for the rest of this year if he's playing well.
Well, that's a possibility. I won't argue with that. If we're not looking down the road at 24, then I could foresee that happening. I really could. It's going to be it's interesting to know that up to this point, Votto has not commented. I don't think. I haven't read the Inquirer this morning, but I don't think he's commented on what Nick said to Jim Bowden yesterday or what appeared yesterday in The Athletic. You would certainly think that people like Trent Rosecrans and Bobby Nightingale and all the rest of those guys would go to Joey and say, you have a comment on what Nick said to Jim Bowden. I'm surprised that's not happened yet.
Yeah, I am too. I'm really surprised, especially since that story came out yesterday. And I looked in the Inquirer this morning. There was nothing there that I could see, but who knows what happens. All right, anything else on your mind, including it could be any number of topics. It could be Jim Bowden. It could be Cam Newton. It could be Thom Izzo. Any thoughts on anything?
Well, I'm a big fan of Thom Izzo. I mean, once again, the Big Ten has proven how blastingly overrated it is as a conference. But leave it to Thom Izzo to carry the banner. I think he's one of the top 5 coaches in college basketball, and I'm happy for him. And if somebody would whisper in my ear today that, would you be happy if Michigan State won the NCAA championship? I'd say absolutely I would. Yes, I would.
All right, well, before Casey has a question, but before I'll let you go, what do you think about your guy Patino?
I call that shot. As soon as St. John's fired Mike Davis, I said that's where he's going to go. And this was after the conversation that started about him possibly going to Georgetown.
Yep.
And then St. John's. I think 6-year contract. You can book it now. Sometime within the next 3 years, that team is going to be a serious contender.
Yep, no doubt about it.
Take it to the bank.
Take it to the bank. No doubt.
What about your boy Cal? Wait a minute, time out here now. You sucking up to Calipari on last week's show. What about now?
Hey, you know what?
How about your guy Cal?
Well, my guy Cal, look, that I refrain from beating up on college kids in any form or fashion. But look, when your best guy goes 1 for 15 from the floor, or second best guy, she weighs the best guy. Yeah, that's right. But when your best player on the perimeter goes 1 for 15, and look, God bless the kid. He had an off night. He felt terrible. He had a great year. That was a great game. Charles Barkley said after the game, it's not like Kentucky played bad. Kentucky played a good game. They turned it over a little more than they should and they normally do, but they played a good game. Kansas State just played better.
Well, whatever. What you say is probably true, but let's make sure we understand one thing. That poor kid felt bad. That poor kid doesn't feel bad when he puts that cash in his back pocket in the NIL, does he? Well, I don't have any problem. I have no problem now criticizing college athletics. I didn't when I worked all the college basketball I did and at all the levels I worked at, I was never critical of a college player because of the fact that he was not being paid. All bets now are off because of the NIL. I had a guy jump my butt on. He said, these are just college kids. I said, no, they're not. Not anymore. The playing field now has changed. And you have every right in the world to be critical of a kid who's being paid to play. So I don't feel bad about that poor college kid that went 1 for 15. Give the money back, son, if you're so embarrassed about your performance. That ain't happening.
All right, one thing before Casey has a question for you. This has been a narrative that I've heard for a long time. And look, I'm not behind closed doors. This circles back for a second to Votto. There's a narrative out there for fans who love Joey Votto. And this guy's been one of the top 3 players, 5 players in the history of the franchise. There's no debate about it from an offensive standpoint. Not even debatable. But there's this narrative out there of poor Joey Votto. He's been stuck playing for a bad team. He's been stuck paying for a team that doesn't spend the money to try to win, which well over half of this 10-year contract, the Reds have spent enough money to win. I'm not defending ownership, but they have spent enough money to win. And he's played on some good teams for the better part of half of this 10-year contract. But there's this narrative out there, and it's on the chat right now, where people say, that the Reds are, from the fans, are under a lot of pressure to trade Votto to give him a chance to win. I don't buy that narrative one single bit. Do you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And again, they are passionate Joey Votto fans, and I understand that. Fans of Pete Rose are just as passionate today as they were when he was one of the great players in the game. But I can tell you this, when this team allowed Pete to walk and ultimately get signed by the Philadelphia Phillies in 1978 or 79, the outcry for him, to my way of thinking now, was not nearly as great as it is for those passionate fans who support Joey Votto no matter what happens, no matter how productive, no matter how unproductive he might be. They are steadfast in his corner. And no, I don't think this organization has any obligation at all to deal him or any player for that matter. You're paying them. You're paying them to play well, and they're trying to play well. But for them to just arbitrarily say, well, you know what? He's been such a great player and a wonderful citizen for our team in this town over the last however many years. We owe it to him to trade him to a contending club. That's a bunch of crap.
Well, the part I was talking about more so than that, I agree with what you just said, but the part I think where the narrative is, and for most fans, they feel like the Reds are handcuffing this guy from possibly trading him. Nothing is further from the truth. Votto has enough cachet and enough clout where if he walked in the door, okay, and
yes,
he would have said any time over the last 3 years, hey, listen, we're not going anywhere. You're paying me a pile of money. I'd like to go somewhere to try and win. And if the Reds have said, no, you know what, get out of here, we're not having this conversation. That's just simply not accurate. It's not saying that he's ever done that before. But if he wanted to go somewhere else and play for a contender, I would bet the ranch that says he would have had enough clout to walk in and say, can you make this happen for me, please?
That's the reason why I don't think he's ever gone in there and asked him that. I don't think that's ever taken place. And so, I agree with everything you've said, every single thing you've said. But the fact of the matter is, the only way the team would have taken the bull by the horns was to go on to him or have him come to them and say, hey, what can you do? All I'm asking you is you try to make a deal that would get me to a team that has a chance of being in the postseason and hopefully the World Series. I truly don't believe that conversation's ever taken place.
All right, Casey, did you have something to say to Mr. Brennaman?
I did. And I'm going to try to make this as simple question as I possibly can. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, but it's been a very big debate in this office about how we can improve the World Baseball Classic. Is it the game of baseball that Americans just don't care? Or is it because there's not good enough pitching? Is it because fill in the blank? How do we make it better? What are your thoughts on the World Baseball Classic? Can we maybe one day see it as the World Cup, where Americans just care to win because we're Americans? Is there any future like that you can see?
I don't, the way things are right now, Casey, I don't see how that can ever happen. You take the situation that whereby this is being played while Major League Baseball is undergoing a spring training. Obviously, we've seen the results of that because there's obvious constraints placed on teams in the WBC as far as pitching and number of innings and that type of thing is concerned. You're never going to see. I should not say that because I don't believe in the word never. But I don't think you'll ever see Major League Baseball take a break in the middle of the season to allow these guys who are by now tuned up to the nth degree. And if they need to go 9 innings in a World Baseball Classic game, they can do that. I don't think that'll ever happen, and we already know that it doesn't happen as far as the Summer Olympics every 4 years in the Olympic Games are concerned. That they don't let their big league ball players take off to go play for the United States Olympic team. So I don't see how anything can happen to enhance the appeal on the part of American fans to support their team. I don't think that'll ever happen. I truly do not. And, you can try and place blame. I don't know you can place blame on anybody for that. Major League Baseball doesn't want to interrupt its season and allow some key players to go off and play for the WBC team representing this country. So do you have an idea about how they can make that happen?
I mean, my only thought would be to delay the season, push it back by 2
Not
weeks.
happening.
And, yeah, I mean, I just don't know. There's no other real way unless, like you said, they break it up. And I didn't really even consider of the Olympics. I think that would even be more of a big deal. But they don't even send their guys to that.
No.
That's right.
No, they don't. No. Paul, you have anything for Mr. Brennaman or no?
No, I think we covered everything on college
Well,
basketball.
the only thing that Richard from Indian Hill, you're familiar with Richard from Indian Hill, Dad.
Yes.
You're shrugging your shoulders already, but I got to tell you, he asked a very interesting point. I didn't even think of this when I brought up the name Jim Bowden. But Richard from Indian Hill writes, "Can we get
fixed income?" Go ahead.
Excuse me.
I said Richard now lives on a fixed
No,
income.
he's not. No, he came in the other day in his Maserati out to Buffalo Wild Wings and met us out there with his good friend Tracy Jones. He asked this simple question. Can we get Marty and Jim Bowden on this podcast together at the same time? And let's once and for all peacefully settle any differences from the past, almost like a Camp David Accords. And he suggests that I could play the role of, say, Jimmy Carter in the whole thing.
The answer to that question is an absolute, unequivocal no. I have no reason to be a friend of Jim Bowden's. He has no reason to be a friend of mine. I can't believe the guy's changed any from the time in which he was a general manager of this club. And so it'd be a waste of my time to sit down and try to iron out whatever differences we've had through 25 or 30 years. No, tell Richard I'm not interested in anything like that.
How about Tony La Russa? Alex wants to know about Tony La Russa. I think you guys ended up actually patching things up a little bit there near the end, didn't you?
No, you think definitely wrong. That's absolutely not true. I don't think so. I thought Tony changed a lot. I knew Tony when he was managing the White Sox. Roland Heeman was a general manager, and Tony was he was a great guy. He really, truly was. And then for whatever the reason, he started believing in his own publicity, and he became something of a jerk. And I could not believe how much he had changed from when he managed the White Sox and when I saw him in Oakland during the 1990 World Series. I thought he changed a tremendous amount. And so, no, I wouldn't have any reason to sit down and talk to him either.
I think those are both great ideas. I'm sorry. Maybe you'll change your mind to be a willing participant. I mean, I'd be happy to reach out to Bowden. I'd be happy to reach out to La Russa.
Well, I'll give it some thought.
Okay, please do. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. Great to see you last night at Mariemont's big lacrosse win. You were out there in the cold, wearing no socks. 35
Proud
degrees.
Proud of Luke last night, man. Proud of Luke.
Yeah, gamer.
Yep.
All right. I'll talk to you. Have a good day.
All right, pal. Take care. Right. You guys have a good week.
You too, Marty.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
How about that, fellas? I mean, we covered all there with the Hall of Famer.
We did. We always
You know
did.
what? I like Richard's idea. Because, see, it's interesting that my dad has not gotten along well with La Russa or Bowden. I've gotten along beautifully with them. Now, maybe that is somewhat disparaging or saying something disparaging about me and my character, which is questioned frequently. But I think it would actually be a good thing. I mean, some of that was tongue-in-cheek, but I really mean that. Because all three of those guys, if nothing else, they have one thing in common. They all love baseball. They all love baseball. We got to get Bowden and Tony La Russa on the show. I think we can make that happen. I always had a good relationship with both of them. All right. We've got Brian Billick coming up at 11. We have a number of topics to get into with him today. Yesterday, the Bengals made Nick Scott their brand new safety available. And we have some of his comments, correct, Casey McAllister?
Yeah, I just compiled some of his better moments in his media day presser and thought everyone should take a listen to this.
All right, well, let's hear it from Nick Scott, the newest Cincinnati Bengals starting safety.
One of the first ones being the need for a safety, right? That's a no-brainer. Wanted to be somewhere where I felt like I was wanted. Another huge factor, just coming out here on this visit and getting a chance to meet Coach Lou and Coach Rob and, just talk ball with them. I'm super excited about what those guys can do. Their scheme and everything like that and how they see me fitting into it. That being said, they got a great group of DBs here as well, a group that's really tight-knit. Those guys have already got my number and reached out and made me feel welcome. And then the other side of that is the family aspect. I grew up in Pennsylvania, so it's not too far from my family. And I think most importantly that this team has a real shot at winning a championship. Yeah, just being a guy that can kind of, move around in the back and, have eyes on everything and, try to just read the quarterback and react and play like that. Be a guy that can make calls for the DBs and get everybody in the right positions. So I'm excited.
What was it like talking to Louis Anarumo when you guys first met? What did you like about him?
I just like, his personality. He's a real cool guy. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find a balance of somebody who's, a cool guy, sociable, but also like a wizard in terms of football, as I think some people put it. So, he's got a nice balance where he can hold a conversation, doesn't always have to talk ball, but, when he does start talking ball, you really want to listen and hone in because, he's got a lot of experience and he clearly knows what he's doing, what he's talking about. I'll say one of the things that just feels great already about this organization is the amount of players that have already reached out to me, tracked my number down, did all that stuff, reached out, congratulated me, and, expressed their excitement to play ball with me, which, it just makes me feel welcome. It makes me feel comfortable, and it's going to make it easier to really come in and just get to work. I'm going to try to earn it every day, right, other than just being a guy who's been in the league for a while. I'm just going to try to go out there and earn my players and coaches' trust and earn their respect. And, if they see me as a person that they would like to have to be a leader, then, I'll gladly fulfill that role. But I just want to fit in wherever they see fit, however the coaches see fit and the locker room sees fit, and contribute that way.
All right, couple of thoughts on this young man. First of all, I mean, how incredibly articulate is that guy? You can tell he's a smart kid. Let's start with that. Pennsylvania kid, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, went on to Penn State. He talked about going out and proving it every single day. Okay, now you talk about a guy that's had to prove it every single day. He went to this whole high-profile program in Penn State, right? He was a 7th-round draft choice. There were 242 players chosen ahead of Scott in 2019. In 19 and 20, he's a backup guy. 21, he's a backup guy. And then all of a sudden that year, you may remember, Jordan Fuller, okay, once they got to the end of the regular season 2 years ago, Fuller gets hurt. So now Scott is asked, beginning with the playoffs, to take over as a starter in the Rams Super Bowl run. He had an interception in the win over Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. He started in the Super Bowl against the Bengals. And then last year became a full-time starter for the first time in his 4th year in the league. So this guy understands and knows what it takes to have to earn it. He had a career-high 86 tackles. He had 2 picks last year, forced a couple of fumbles in 16 starts. He's only 27. So the Bengals feel like they're getting not only a younger player than Von Bell, I don't think anybody thinks today that Scott is Von Bell, but he's younger. He's more athletic. His body is not taking the toll, although Bell is only 1 year older than Scott. Bell's been around forever. He's only 28. But his body is a younger than 28-year-old Von Bell. That's for sure. So I tell you, that's an impressive young man right there.
I would agree with that, Tom. Go ahead.
Casey, give me the overall read on Nick Scott.
I think he's like I said before, I think the signing was a very good value signing. I think what he brings to the table could be very high. He's a very high ceiling sort of player, right? His relative athletic score, very, very high, and up in the 90 percentile.
What does that mean?
So he grades the top 90th percentile in all athletes ever recorded in the draft or pro day.
What?
And so does Dax.
We got Bo Jackson?
No. No.
Dion!
That doesn't always mean that it translates on the field.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with the mental part of it as well. And that goes for a lot of athletes. But as of right now, what they've done is gotten much more athletic in the backfield. Guys that can go high, guys that can play in the box, and they don't have to do as much to disguise what the safety's job is on a specific play because of this. And yes, I was on the train for Rapp. I thought he filled in Von Bell's role better, just from a more he played the box a lot more. He played that style more.
More physical style.
More physical style. He's bigger. But the fact now that they can play either guy in the box or high or however they see fit, that is what Lou loves to do. That is something that Lou cherishes in players. You can see throughout the draft how he views, just if you look at the defensive line, he never chooses a guy, or he hasn't as of right now, a guy that's over 315 or under 280. He picks those guys that are in between that can play on the outside if they want to, or they can play on the inside. Guys that are versatile in this defense are what Lou cherishes. And to me, he had a choice between Taylor Rapp and Nick Scott, and he wanted Nick Scott over Taylor Rapp. So in my mind, great signing, because that's the guy that they wanted. They had a choice between the two of them, and they're going in a direction where they can fill either role, which is pretty much what the Bengals need right now, so then they can save up in different areas.
Well, we're going to ask Brian Billick a number of questions coming up at 11 o'clock, and one of them would be, as a former Super Bowl winning head coach, you look at the way the Bengals and what they've done so far in this offseason. Okay, they've addressed the offensive line. They've done a great job there. They've now addressed the safety situation. We'll see how that plays out. It's a big year for Dax Hill. I mean, you drafted this guy, right, for a reason, to be a big-time player and a starter. This is his chance. He's not done it so far, but he hasn't been given a legitimate chance so far. We're going to ask him about, all right, what about now? What about now? If Brian Billick ran the team, right, you got to do something about the tight end spot. Okay, is that in the draft? Or can you find another Hayden Hurst? Like they brought in Moreau the other day, left without a deal. What do you think happens with the running back room? P. Ryan's gone. Mixon more than likely staring down the barrel at a pay cut. And if he doesn't want that, he's gone. Where can you fill those two spots in particular best in the draft or in free agency? Tight end, running back. Ham and Eggers, take it away before we get to Brian Billick.
All right.
It's that time of the show, the Ham and Eggers. These guys are great. Trust me, I would know. I introduce all the best segments.
Door's out of the way, just in time. Look at that. You're getting this down to a science.
Yes, he is.
Do you have something to say before I get to the ads?
Just a few things that are Bengals related before we get Billick on the show because I think he's going to also give some insight on what the Bengals have done so far and what they should do next.
Okay.
At this point in free agency, I cannot justify cutting Joe Mixon anymore. I can't, because every guy that I think could have replaced the role of P. Ryan and added a running back that could run and receive the ball at a good enough level, I think has been signed, or I think they lost their opportunity. And to be quite honest, I don't think it was ever in the Bengals' mind to cut him, or they might have asked him to restructure, or they might have asked him to renegotiate. But there's no way they were ever going to let Joe Mixon walk out those doors, especially after the reports of P. Ryan receiving a very similar deal, if not the exact same deal that he got for Denver. I think they're trying to keep it the same. And I don't know what they do now, if they go for a running back in the draft, but at this point, they're going to have to. I don't think there's anyone that can replace that pass blocking back in the free agency right now to a good enough degree that makes sense, and for the money. Second off, I think now more than ever, Foster Moreau is a target in free agency that I think we need to press more on, because the deal that Dalton Schultz got for $9 million for 1 year, if I were Duke Tobin, I would have been all over that. In my opinion, you had $18 million left roughly, with the available space that you can get with some of the cuts that you can make and the potential to trade Jonah Williams away. 1 year, $9 million to me, that's nothing. That's great, especially for the value that he brings. And I know tomorrow we were supposed to do a whole section on it, but since he got signed, I'm just going to list some things off really quickly that Bengals fans probably didn't know. He was top 5 in contested catching. He was top 10 in inline blocking. And those two things together are perfect for this offense. And even if you signed him to a longer deal, Tyler Boyd in the slot, he's gone. He's not under contract next year. You can easily replace those snaps with Schultz. But now that he's gone, there's no point in really discussing it anymore. I thought the deal that he got was a steal for the Texans. We'll see how that all plays out for him.
Schultz is one of those guys who was nicked up last year. I mean, he missed a couple of games, maybe missed more than 2 or 3. I understand all those metrics you just talked about. I mean, he's a solid player. But I think you're going to see, well, it'll be interesting to see what the Texans do with their quarterback situation, that's for sure. Carolina now has a number 1 pick. And that's another thing we're going to ask Brian Billick about coming up here shortly. He's written a number of books. But in one of them, and I'm drawing a blank, I'll ask him the name of the title in case some of you are interested to read it. This was an offensive-minded guy in Billick. He was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota when they basically broke every record there was in a 16-game schedule in the history of the league. Yards, points, passing yards. I mean, he had stars everywhere. He had Randy Moss. He had Jake Reed. He had Chris Carter. He had Robert Smith. A couple of Buckeyes, by the way, there. Smith and Carter. But he had Culpepper. I mean, they were virtually unstoppable until they got in the postseason. But point being is, he's always been an offensive guy. He came up under Bill Walsh when he first started with the 49ers. But he wrote himself, admittedly. He said, look, with all the metrics, all the stuff that's out there when it comes to evaluating a college quarterback and drafting that college quarterback in the first round, it is the most inexact science there is out there. Period. He said, and he, in that chapter, he gets into Achilles Smith and I've mentioned this before, but at the time when he was still the head coach in Baltimore, he thought Achilles Smith had a legitimate chance to be a great player in the NFL. Well, we know that didn't happen. He came to the Bengals. He was only a one-year starter at Oregon, and it just never happened. Obviously, look no further than Tom Brady. I mean, every team in the NFL had 6 or 7 chances to draft him, right?
Right.
Nobody did till New England, down near the end of the draft. Greatest quarterback of all time. A lot of people question Joe Montana coming out. How great was he going to be? You look at some of the quote-unquote experts out there. Just in the last 3 or 4 years, guys that think they really know about quarterbacks coming out and how they rank them 1 to 5 on any given year. I saw where yesterday Chris Sims, son of Phil Sims, who in his own right was a college quarterback at the University of Texas. He's gone on to do very good things on television in his career at Fox and some other places. But he came out with his listings, and he puts them into, I think it's a tier 1 and a tier 2 and a tier 3 and a tier 4, right? The tier 1 guys, he thinks, that's the guy, right? And he has C.J. Stroud, the only tier 1 guy this year. Then he has Bryce Young, and I'm drawing a blank on but he has 3 other guys listed well ahead of Will Levis out of Kentucky. Now, Levis is one of those Josh Allen, big, strong, tough guys, allegedly. Richardson, we know his body and all the, the stuff that doesn't add up to a hill of beans when you're taking a shotgun snap on a 3rd and 7 against whoever. So what? He's a good long jump and good high jump. When's the last time a quarterback had to do anything to long jump and a high jump? I mean, what the hell does that mean?
It grades his explosiveness.
The high jump?
Yeah. Yeah.
When's the last time you saw a quarterback do anything in a game that resembled a high jump?
I mean, jumping over the pile on a red zone.
Ask Tyler Huntley about that one.
Didn't end well for him.
No, it did not. But I only bring up Chris Sims. I'm not picking on him. He might turn out to be 100% correct. All I'm saying is that when it comes down to this whole thing, and a couple teams have said already publicly they're not scared about the height of Bryce Young. They're not scared about the weight of Bryce Young, although as far as his height and his weight are concerned, he I can't remember the exact stat, but he would be the shortest and the lightest quarterback to go in the top 3-4 picks in the history of the NFL. Now, Drew Brees wasn't tall. Drew Brees wasn't heavy, but one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Another guy coming out of Purdue. And then even after he played for San Diego, he gets hurt, shoulder. Final 2 teams were Miami and New Orleans. It is without a doubt the single greatest free agent signing in the history of the National Football League, and it's not even remotely close. Not even close. I don't care what name you come up with. No signing in the history of the NFL was a better free agent signing than Drew Brees. Period, end. Teams up with Sean Payton, playoffs year after year, won a Super Bowl. He breaks all kinds of records. You know the rest of the story. So we're going to talk about some of this with Brian Billick coming up momentarily. Tracy Jones will join us in the final 30 minutes. Laura does say the high jump might mean something on the Tim Tebow pass.
Yeah, the jump pass.
So a high jump might come into play there. So I stand corrected. Of course, they ran Tim Tebow out of the, they ran Tim Tebow out of the league.
Played the wrong position, Tom.
Here's all I know, and I've had this debate with many, many people before, including Brian Billick. All I know is Tim Tebow won a playoff game and took a team to the playoffs. He beat the Steelers.
He did.
He did. And nobody else gave him another chance. Okay. You can say his mechanics and Brian and I did a bunch of games where Brian actually did a phenomenal job of breaking down all of his mechanics and all that kind of thing, and it was fascinating. But it is what it is. Is Brian ready to go?
Yes, he is.
All right, let's go to Brian Billick. Coach, good to have you on this morning. Looks like you're traveling a little bit. Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm in cold, wet California. Came out here to get some warm weather and was betrayed. So I am in Southern California a little bit and then on to Arizona.
Okay, let me ask you this real quick. We were on the quarterback topic, and you wrote in one of the chapters of your book. Refresh me with that book where you had the chapter on the quarterbacks, the title of that book.
The Q Factor.
Yeah, the Q Factor. So, we're sitting here talking about quarterbacks, and everybody's coming out with their guy who they think the guy should be for Carolina, the first pick in the draft.
Right.
What and you're not following it like you used to, but you're still following it, based on, game film, based on combine, based on all these kinds of things. If you're Carolina and you're picking a quarterback, who's the first one you're taking?
Wow. Well, the top four seem to be everybody's focused on Bryce Young, Stroud, the Levi kid from Kentucky, and, of course, Richardson from Florida. And all four, there's no reason why all four shouldn't be good pros, but via the Q Factor. And as we know from history, the fact of the matter is half of them are going to fail because that's just the way it works. It's a 50-50 proposition. There's no reasons. They all have the prerequisite abilities, but so did Jamarcus Russell. And so did, the list goes on and on and on, whether it was David Carr, whether it was, the list goes on and on. So there's no reason all of them shouldn't be good. It depends on where they go. Does the organization really commit to their style of play, which we're seeing is so important in terms of a team like Baltimore that committed to the Lamar Jackson style of play. And what Jalen Hurts finally, when Philadelphia came around, said, okay, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to wrap the town around, and this is what we're going to do. So, yeah, those seem to be the top four guys. I wouldn't begin to venture, what order or who's going to make it or who's not going to make it. History tells us that half of them will and half of them won't.
Okay. You're a head coach. You're assembling a roster. The Bengals have addressed the safety position. They clearly have addressed the offensive line position with Orlando Brown. That was a shocker to everybody around these parts, and I think around the NFL for that matter. So, you're starting to patch things together now with a questionable offensive line. You had a need at safety. You've addressed that. You got former number one pick in Hill. You bring in Nick Scott from the Rams. Okay. As a head coach, which is the easiest thing to replace? And which avenue would you replace it in, either free agency or the running back position? A lot of people think that Mixon, if he won't redo his deal, could be cut loose on June the 1st. Samaje Perine has already left. Hayden Hurst is gone. They don't have a single tight end on the roster. With those two positions, which one would you look at in addressing in free agency, and which one would you look at addressing in the draft?
Well, it has changed. For a while, the running back position was one that you felt like you could get better value in the second, third, fourth round in running back. You don't have to commit a first-round pick to the running back. Although that's changed a little bit. Some of the guys that have been taken really, really early. This running back from Texas appears to be very good. Obviously, he's going to go long before Cincinnati, given their current state. What are they picking, 28, something like that?
Yep.
But there's going to be, my guess is that later in the round, on say the 28th pick, that you're going to be able to look at the running back position and probably the tight end position as well, and say, okay, the guy we have slotted in the second or third round is likely as good as where we have these other guys rated up, so we can get more numbers later on. Now, whether that's true or not, that depends. You look at the number one tight end appears to be the Kincaid kid from Utah. I haven't gone into it and seen later on where you could get, but I imagine you could get good value, which is always what you're looking for. I don't know that you have to commit the 28th pick to it. That you could, the running back or the tight end that you can get. You look at the top tight ends in the league right now, whether it be a Travis Kelce, whether it be Mark Andrews. Those were second and third round picks. So there is value there. For a team like Cincinnati, I always looked at the, okay, I don't want to look at the 28th pick as being an early round pick. Okay. And looking at that, you look at, and again, I'm throwing out names here that it's way too early to understand. But there's a lineman from Wisconsin. And when was the last time an offensive lineman from Wisconsin wasn't really good? Kid Tippmann or something like that. He to me would be a really good value. Some people have him early in the second round. Maybe at the end of that first round. And I don't think, or you fall back a little bit. And get a guy like that early. You pick up an early second round pick. So there's a lot of options there. I kind of like the position that Cincinnati's in with that 28th pick.
All right. Last two things I want to ask you about. Mike Tannenbaum, former general manager in the NFL with the Jets and with Miami, came out and said that as it pertains to the Aaron Rodgers situation, Rodgers has already gone on record as saying he wants to play for the Jets, but a deal has to be done. He swears up one side and down the other. The Jets hold all the cards on this deal, that they have all the leverage, and they don't have to give up a number one pick. Forget 2 number one picks. You buy that?
Boy, I don't know. That depends on. I can't imagine that Green Bay isn't going to stick to their guns because there's other players, and how much control does Rodgers have to say, okay, this is where I want to go, so you have to make that happen. So there's some intricacies there that I don't, not privy to them in terms of it's who really has the control. And if Rodgers doesn't, then obviously Green Bay does, and they can demand whatever price they want. If Rodgers does have a way to veto it, then Green Bay is going to have to, bite its lip and take the best deal that it can to get whatever they can to transition him to wherever it is he wants to go.
But as a head coach, and in LaFleur's case here, and you were a former Super Bowl winning head coach, went to the playoffs year after year after year, championship games, etc. Can Green Bay bring him back? He's already said he wants to play for another team.
Yeah, we've been through this before. We were at the end of last year, and then you kind of kiss and make up, and it's fine, and you move forward. As a coach, absolutely. Now, whether can the organization, the team, the general manager, can you do that? It's awful hard to go back into that locker room, because you basically said from Rodgers' standpoint, I don't want to be here. And if circumstances lead to, I am going to come back here. Yeah, it's okay, but we'll make it okay. And because the players will look at it and go, hey, I may be in that position later at some point, so I'm fine with it. But does it undermine the real camaraderie of the team and what you need from that quarterback and the relationship from the quarterback to the organization to the head coach? That's not a good thing. It's awful hard to go back into that situation.
All right, last thing I want to ask you about, and we ask you about this all the time. We're 8-9 days now into this whole Lamar Jackson thing. I brought up earlier the Jackson camp keeps things very, close to the vest, that kind of thing. Should we be making anything out of the fact that we've not heard of a contract offer to Jackson at this point by any other team?
No, because again, we talked about it a little bit last week, that the teams, this is a process that should make it available for a player to let somebody else come in and make an offer. And then the Ravens can either match it or not. And then get the draft choices that come with it. But that can be a little dicey because the contract that you do, you don't want to just negotiate. And that's what the Ravens are doing right now. Great, we'll let someone else negotiate it. Hey, it's not our fault you can't get this contract. This is what the market is, and so this is what it is. And they don't have to be the bad guy here. That only kind of goes so far. It still sours the relationship with the player. And I'm hearing, like we say, they were disrespected by the offer, that there was only $139 million guaranteed compared to the $180 million in some of the other like we said, that great disrespect when you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. But it has gotten to that point, and the fact that uncharacteristic of the Ravens, when you see some of the players chirping a little bit, Ozzie Newsome's kind of had to reassert himself out front, even though he's in an emeritus status there because of DaCosta and some of the players, and then John Hart. There's some unusual chatter going on around this that is unique. You know, Ravens usually don't deal with that, which tells me this thing's kind of getting a little sour.
Brian, we thank you for getting up and at 'em bright and early out there in rainy California. And thanks for your time, my friend. Have a great trip to Arizona.
Try to do it.
All right, buddy. Brian Billick, kind enough to join us. I just can't see, and I'm sure I'm going to be wrong on this, but I just can't see. Let's start with Aaron Rodgers. Look, he did say you can kiss and make up. But if you're a teammate, okay, and you play for the Green Bay Packers, the leader of your team, a 4-time most valuable player, a Super Bowl champion, and some will say only won one. Well, look, you know, he's been pretty doggone good for a long, long time, right? The face of your franchise. They sell more Aaron Rodgers jerseys than anybody around Green Bay. Not even close. Maybe the NFL for that matter. I'll ask each of you. He's already gone on record as saying, I want to play for the New York Jets. Now, if for some reason this deal can't get done, let's start with just as a pure fan. Let me ask you guys this question. Paul, I'll start with you. As a pure fan of the Green Bay Packers, how would you feel about Rodgers coming back to your team?
Well, I think you could look at it one of two ways. One, you could look at it and say to yourself, he's not going to put his entire intensity into it because he didn't get what he wants. But I think he's too much of a competitor to do that. Now, the flip side of that is he's a shell of what he was. And watching him last season, I was making the comments to Trace all season, and we were talking about it all year. He's missing guys over the middle of the field that are wide open by 10 yards. He's overthrowing guys that are coming across the left hash without a defender 5 yards from them, and he's overthrowing the ball. He's throwing behind the guys. He's throwing in front of the guys. He is a shell of what he was. So it's not so much the fact that he wants to go to New York that I would be annoyed by if I was a Packers fan getting him back. I just think they could probably go get somebody better right now. Truthfully.
Okay.
I seriously think I don't know if that's you just trust Jordan Love and his development and you try to go a third straight championship pedigree quarterback from Favre to Rodgers to Love and you just hope that works out. But if I'm the Packers right now, I quite honestly think you could probably do better than Rodgers if you're assuming that he doesn't progress from last year or get better. If you think that last year was an indication of where Rodgers' career is now, then, I mean, for lack of a better term, he's done. And why waste the energy and resources on him? So if I'm a fan, Trace would know this entirely better than I would, being a diehard Packers fan like he is. But I wouldn't want him, just skill-wise. So compound that with the fact that he already said that he wanted to go to the Jets. See ya.
All right. I liken this a little bit to, let's just try to draw an analogy here. And Casey, I want to stick with this from a fan perspective. And tell me if this analogy is off base, because it just popped into my mind. This would be like for a Reds fan, to try and bring it a little closer to home, okay? Rodgers has been there for longer than a decade. Joey Votto's been there longer than a decade. If Joey Votto came out during the offseason and he said, you know what, I want to go play for fill in the blank. Take away all the quack stuff, all right, that some are writing here. There's no debate that Rodgers is a different kind of a cat, okay? All right? But you can never question, just like you can never question Votto being all in to being the ultimate pro and being ready to play. I mean, this guy's a 4-time most valuable player. Votto's won it once. But it would be like Votto coming out and saying, you know what, I want out of here. I want out. And all of a sudden the team, for some reason, they can't make a deal, and now Votto's back. You okay as a Packer fan if Rodgers is back?
I think if I were in their shoes that I would want to just move on. And there's no one better to understand this whole thing than our own boss, Trace Fowler, who has been just dying for there to be some resolution to this, probably for a year at least, maybe even more than that. All the talk of him retiring and the nonsense that that is pretty much just what it is. It's nonsense that Aaron Rodgers has put the fan base through. I think people are just tired of it, and I think they're ready to move on. I think it's been since last year, since they weren't even able to make it to the playoffs. I don't think they see any sort of resolution there to where they're going to be competitive next year. We're pretty much bringing in the exact same roster, maybe even worse. Yeah, that's right. It is going to be worse. Zadarius Smith leaving. There's just a lot of, to me, bad taste. A lot of bad taste in their mouth. And it reminds me more of the Carson Palmer situation, where we paid the guy a lot of money, and he tried to say that we weren't, putting pieces around him to make him a Super Bowl worthy team. So he wiggles his way out, forces, pretty much says that he's going to retire if you don't trade me. We trade him. We get a haul for it. And he always, the part where it got sour was Carson never forgave us. I feel like Aaron won't be like that, but I feel like the situation is very similar, where I think fans were ready to just get rid of him at that point. Fans were ready to let go of Carson Palmer. He didn't want to be here.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to be in Green Bay. So why are we holding on to him? Let's just find a way to get him for as much as you possibly can. And then that just brings up, the one point is, who's got the leverage, right? Which team has leverage here? I still don't really know that question, honestly. I don't know the answer to that. It's a very, very peculiar situation that the league has not been in a while. I don't think there's been a situation that I can remember like this.
You bring up an interesting point, because I was just going back and looking up some of the stuff from Carson Palmer. You may remember that in leading up to the 2011 NFL draft, okay, Marvin Lewis said that Carson Palmer told him that he planned on retiring. In response, the Bengals chose Andy Dalton out of TCU with their second-round pick. So now you get to July after Dalton has already been picked, okay? And there's a press conference. Mike Brown only does this once a year. But it's interesting to go back and just read these words in the comments made by Brown as it pertained then to Palmer. And let's place these same words now to Rodgers, okay? This was Mike Brown saying he did not expect Carson Palmer to return to the Bengals in 2011. The organization wished him well, and that there were no plans whatsoever to trade him. They were not going to do it. When asked why he would not trade Carson Palmer, here's the quote. And you can fill in Aaron for Carson here, okay? Carson signed a contract. He made a commitment. He gave his word. We relied on his word. We relied on his commitment to this franchise. We expected him to perform here. He's going to walk away from his commitment, and we are not going to reward him for doing so by trading him. Those are pretty interesting words right there. And those were made almost 12 years ago.
I think that was their mindset back when. I think the Packers organization has definitely had a switch of heart or
change of heart.
Change of heart, yeah. Thank you for
correcting. I mean,
it
all works.
But yeah, I mean it. Yeah, I can see where you could draw very similar comparisons maybe last year to this conversation, to those quotes. I think this year it's definitely changed, but the fan perspective, I think they were ready to move on after he decided to retire, in my opinion. The Bengals fans were ready to move on. I think it was honestly a blessing in disguise that he ended up coming out of retirement and being traded, because we got a nice little haul for that too. You know, it was 2 first-round picks.
Well, they got Dre. They ended up getting, it wasn't first rounds, but they ended up getting Dre Kirkpatrick. He was a first-round pick, and then they got Giovanni Bernard, who I think was a second-round pick.
They also got Zeitler out of it, right? Or
know.
that was their initial pick, but either way.
No, it wound up being the Bengals got a first-round pick in 2012, which they used on Dre Kirkpatrick, and got a conditional second-round pick in 2013, which would have been a first-round pick if the Raiders had reached the AFC Championship game in 2011, which they did not, once Palmer left to go there. So they end up getting Dre Kirkpatrick, and then the second-round pick that it turned out to be was indeed North Carolina running back Giovanni Bernard. And look, both of those players were excellent players for this franchise for a number of years. I'm surprised Kirkpatrick's not still in the league right now. Gio is. All right, then there's the and we're going to get into a lot of this tomorrow. We're going to start talking about, Brian Billick said he's not surprised that we haven't heard anything about Lamar Jackson, that basically the Ravens are letting the rest of the league negotiate his deal for them to not make them look like the bad guys. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and you just heard him say it. All of a sudden, Ozzie Newsome had pretty much ridden off into the sunset, right? Hall of Famer, one of the top executives in the history of the league. I mean, they moved the franchise from Cleveland, where Ozzie Newsome was a legend, and he's got to swallow that whole thing about Modell moving the team to Baltimore. They hire a new coach in Billick. They're doing this whole thing after Marchibroda was originally there, but they got to build up a whole new roster, and Ozzie assembles a Super Bowl roster, arguably the greatest defense. Bear fans would disagree, but arguably the greatest defense in the history of the NFL. And they won a Super Bowl with Billick as the head coach. Ozzie Newsome put that team together. Now he rides off into sunset, kind of. Still around a lot, but not making the decisions, not carrying the heavy water like DeCosta is now. But now Ozzie is getting involved, as Brian just pointed out. You're reading comments from him, and what the hell's he doing in this whole thing, right? Does he even want to be doing anything here? Or are they just putting a respected guy for Ravens fans out in front of everybody because people trust Ozzie Newsome? They trust him and they love him. Bisciotti's not going to go out there. That's not his style, the owner. And DeCosta, he's a guy that right now, if you're in the Lamar Jackson camp, that looks like the bad guy. So, now Ozzie's rolling in, and we gave you some of the details yesterday about, one, we haven't heard of any contract offers, which the Ravens, as we mentioned, have a right to match or give up 2 first-round picks if another team wants to sign him. But as Brian just pointed out, and I've been saying all along, and I don't know if you guys agree with me or disagree. Tell me this. I just think there's a lot of bad blood here.
A lot of bad blood. A lot of bad blood. And I just can't imagine him playing for the Ravens. I just can't. You say that it would be a mistake for him to sit with the tag. I disagree with that, mainly because of 2 different things here. Le'Veon Bell was a running back, an older running back, and it's just never been a very good paid position to begin with. Anyways, Lamar, he is a quarterback, a young quarterback, 25. You're expecting him, if he's your franchise quarterback, to be in the league for at least another 8 to 10 years. And, why risk your health? Because you're part of your game is also being somewhat of a running back. But Lamar, as much as people, including myself, have said that they don't trust him to be a quarterback, He is a quarterback. And that's what people should be looking at this as. To me, as I was doing my research the other day, I think there's a lot of teams right now where he could go and win right now. with some of these teams. But
I don't know what he's ever going to win. I don't think he throws it enough to win.
Well, what I mean is he can go get another MVP sort of level of a season. Like he can – I'm not going to guarantee a Super Bowl run or anything like that, but he could definitely get you back to the playoffs again. He could definitely get back to MVP form.
Do you think the Ravens – I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to ask you this question since you brought up win-win.
Yeah.
Do you think in the closed-door offices of Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, Ozzie Newsome sitting in that room, DeCosta, and John Harbaugh, do you think the words have ever been uttered, fellas, we're never going to win a Super Bowl with this guy as a quarterback?
Ooh, I don't know if that's ever been discussed. Probably not. I think they all have faith in Lamar, but I think the way that they're going about this is they can win a Super Bowl with Lamar at a certain price. And that, to me, tells me everything that I need to know about that team in particular. And that's that they don't trust him to do it by himself. Whereas I think the Bengals, where I would think maybe with the Chiefs as a good example, gave him this major deal and didn't give him hardly any weapons to work with. They gave him a good offensive line, but they were smart about it, right? Like they got a couple rookies that ended up working out on that offensive line. They've spread out their money in a way that made sense for them to have a Super Bowl team. Bengals maybe are the opposite of that, but I think they would believe the same thing, that Joe Burrow could probably do it by himself, that he can elevate talent around him. Lamar, they probably don't think can elevate talent around him without help. And that's why they haven't signed him to a major deal like what we expect him to sign.
What do you think, Paul? Do you think the Ravens have said quietly and will never, even if Lamar's gone tomorrow with another team, they're never going to say, because what's the point? I mean, why beat the guy up on the way out if it turns out to be that way? He's given you a lot in his career. But do you think they've ever had that conversation? That, you know what, fellas, this guy's damn good. He's unique. He's talented. He's fun. Seems like a decent dude. Every time he's interviewed, he seems like a pretty good guy. But do you think they've ever said, hey, we're not winning? I mean, look around. Look around. In our division alone, Burrow, right? Deshaun back. AFC, Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, on and on and on and on. Do you think they've ever said, hey, fellas, we're not winning the whole shooting match with this guy as a quarterback?
I think it's abundantly clear that they've had that conversation at some
I'm with
point,
you.
because I think this has gotten to a situation. It's an untenable situation now in Baltimore where you have the way that the season ended with Lamar, and now you get to this point where you're doing this song and dance on and on and on and on. He was great. He was playing at an MVP level. But can he go and win you the big one? And that's all that matters. It's all that matters is winning. It's all that matters. And if he can't win you the big one, regardless of being an MVP.
Clearly, the other teams, you're spot on before we get to Tracy Jones. I mean, all you have to do is follow the money, okay? Whether that's, lobbyists, whether that's government, whether that's sports. Follow the money. The Bengals are going to give Burrow a big-time deal. They think he can win the whole thing. The Bills have given Allen a big-time deal. They think he can win the whole thing. The Chiefs have given Mahomes big money deal, long-term deal, right? He's already won 2. Aaron Rodgers, whole 9 yards, okay? The Giants believe that Daniel Jones can win the whole thing. Now, they're unique in that they play in the NFC, which is a huge advantage for the Giants, okay? But they believe this guy can win them a Super Bowl. Follow the money, man. Follow the money.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of following the money, he's all about making the money. It's none other. Look at this. He's back in California mode again. Not that they're exclusively in California, but he's got the In-N-Out Burger T-shirt working there. That reeks of California.
Says Cali right here. In-N-Out, California. You know, a little bit overrated on the hamburger. I thought we talked about this one time. It's not one of my favorites. It used to be. You know, the girl that owns In-N-Out, she was the first woman billionaire, because I think her uncle and her dad got in a plane crash and both died, and she took over. And
that's when she started In-N-Out?
Yeah, well, she took over for them and kind of expanded a little bit, but they've just started, I think, in Utah. That place is packed.
I know they're down in Texas. Paul, you were getting ready to comment on In-N-Out Burger. You want to jump in?
No, I was just agreeing. I also think that it's highly overrated. I did not enjoy it.
I don't know. They're pretty good, man. They're pretty good.
The fries are terrible, Tom.
You said the burger. You didn't say anything about the fries. The burger, you know what they remind me of? They remind me of, in many ways, Trace, and it's why they're two of the most successful fast food chains out there, okay? Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out. They're clean, they're safe, and they're consistent.
They are consistent. An interesting story about Chick-fil-A and Chipotle. Both those started up years ago in Southern California. And I hate to talk about SoCal, but you know, everything starts in SoCal, doesn't it, Tom? That in Ohio. And both Chick-fil-A and Chipotle went out of business. Is that hard to believe? It was in Manhattan Beach for Chipotle and on Hawthorne Boulevard. You know where Hawthorne Boulevard is, right?
Yeah.
The airport?
Yep.
That Chick-fil-A went under. I think Chick-fil-A is extremely overrated. I don't like Chick-fil-A, but it is clean and it is consistent.
I think they're rock solid. Hey, are you watching the World Baseball Classic?
You know, I'm not. I'm checking the highlights. That Trey Turner Grand Slam was rather exciting. Yep. Isn't it funny how these ball players get more excited about being in this type of competition than they do playing for their team during the season? It's like an all-star game. You know, you watch them and everybody's giving them a high five. Why don't they carry that over to their team and have the same enthusiasm? I mean, it's kind of refreshing because it brings a lot of energy because everybody's into it. All the countries are into it. But the United States got a good team.
Well, they got a good offensive team, and they're patching it together with, I'm not going to call them journeyman guys, because Adam Wainwright, you know, you can make an argument that guy should be in the Hall of Fame, and Lance Lynn is still a very good pitcher, but they haven't been able to get, you know, the Scherzers and the Verlanders and guys like that where some of the other countries can. Are you going to watch tonight? Japan wins it in the ninth inning, walk-off last night against Mexico. There's talk about Shohei Ohtani. You know he's going to be in the lineup as a hitter. But there's talk about him coming out of the bullpen tonight if they need him. Now, will you watch the game, America versus the Japanese tonight?
Yeah, I will watch the game. When it's nut crunching time, I'm watching sports. It's kind of like tweeting, right? I pretend I don't really know anything. But when it comes down to big time, I'll watch the game. So I'm kind of a front runner in that respect. But Ohtani, you know, your dad and I talked about Ohtani when he was on 60 Minutes. Probably about 8, maybe 10 years ago on Jones and Brennaman on baseball. And we talked about how good he would be coming over to the United States. Could he both pitch and hit? And I think both of us agreed he's going to have to choose one or the other. He can't do both in the big leagues. And I'll be darned, that son of a gun could do both and does it outstanding player.
Yeah, and you know what? Unless he came to me, now he's in the final year of his deal with the Angels, and there's a lot of talk he's going to be the highest paid player. And look, at the end of the day, there is no doubt he should be the highest paid player in Major League Baseball because he's putting up the offensive numbers as an MVP. His pitching numbers are off the charts. He's the only cap that's doing them both regularly since Babe Ruth. That's been a while. So, you know, unless he came to me and said, hey, look, I really got to focus on one or the other, as long as he keeps enjoying it and the results are what they are, I mean, keep on keeping on, right? That's one of your favorite old California terms, keep on keeping on.
He's just consistent. I mean, he's consistent as a pitcher and a hitter. You mentioned Babe Ruth. And it's funny you should say that because it's in my notes to talk about Babe Ruth. Did anyone see the video of Babe taking some swings in a real game? You know, it's real grainy.
Yeah.
And he strikes out on 3 pitches. I have watched that guy swing the bat. And Babe is probably my favorite baseball player of all time. If I could sit down and have a beer, it would be Babe Ruth. I really like him,
yeah,
right? Because he
I hear you.
He hit more home runs than many teams did, right? I mean, it wasn't even close. But Thom, I've got to tell you, he's got a weak stroke. I swear to God, he spin to win, he corkscrews, doesn't foul a pitch off, and he walks his ass back to the dugout. And I'm thinking, this was the greatest player of his time, of his era. I'm thinking, is that really a video of Babe Ruth? I mean, it's kind of like there's a lot of fake news out there, right? We didn't really land on the moon. Everybody knows that, right? That's fake news. So maybe this video isn't true because I'm looking at his swing and there's no way he could hit the amount of home runs that he hit. It's just like Neil Armstrong. How do we get that stupid camera back in 1969 just perfect as he walked off Apollo, whatever it was? Does anyone really believe that? That's fake news, people. We did not land on the moon.
Casey, you have any thoughts on that?
No, I do not have any thoughts on that.
Okay, Casey, I got something for you, buddy.
Oh, boy, here we go.
Here we go. And it's not a big request. It's not a big deal. But I think it's the least you could do for me going to your wedding, right? You're only going to have one celebrity there at the wedding, right? That's me. So what I was thinking, no, like I said, one celebrity. I mean, a guy that actually played the game. So what I'm asking for, if it's too much trouble, just, during dinner or something, I'm going to bring my chair and my table, and I'm going to sign autographs, only for like a half hour or something. People seem to enjoy that when I do that occasionally. They didn't like it so much when I brought the chair and table and signed autographs at a funeral one time. That didn't go over real well. But I think at a wedding, I can do that. Cases, do you think your fiance would be all right with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably work some deal out, like maybe 50% of the proceeds go to us or something like that. We'll make a little.
What were you thinking, Tracer?
Business deal here.
I was thinking a good deal, $5 for 2 autographs. It'll be $15. So yeah, I'm thinking that, and maybe I will donate some money to a charity. I'm thinking maybe 95% goes to me, maybe 5% to the charity. Paul, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, no, I just, again, go back to the fact that we all know that it's your day, Tracy, that you're coming in. Casey's kind of just it's like a co-celebration, right?
Yeah, it's more like we're hosting you there. We're both celebrating.
It's almost like a roast for Tracy Jones, but there just happens to be a wedding ceremony taking place. Is that kind of what you're thinking here?
Yeah, we could do something like that.
Yeah.
A celebration, not a roast, a celebration of Tracy Jones.
Yeah, a celebration of his career and his life. Yeah, but he's not dead.
But I'll bring plenty of cards and just sit there and sign, only for a half an hour. We don't want to make it an all-night thing. But just if I could pick up some, kind of a fee for attending the wedding, I think is only fair. And by the way, guys, want to apologize. Last Thursday at Wings and Rings, want to apologize. What happened? What all went down? I want to apologize to you, Thom.
About what?
To Chatterbox. Well, I sent my body double, and he acted up. I don't know. Did you guys know that was a body double?
Man.
Boy, I thought it was you, but please fill us in. I think all of us are somewhat surprised. Just as surprised as your body double being there to begin with.
Yeah, I had other obligations, and I couldn't make it, so I sent him. And he looks just like me. He's built like me, but his behavior. I mean, here's the difference. I drink vodka. He drinks tequila. I guess he was grabbing the waitresses' butts. Did you get?
Well, I don't know about that. The Golden Girls were complaining that were in attendance that are regular viewers of the program. They were complaining a little bit, but that was a little bit older crowd. I don't know about the servers there and what happened there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that just really wasn't a good situation. And I apologize, Thom. And Casey, I will be going to your wedding. I will. I'll make sure I don't sell my body double because we don't want that guy. He's really a handful.
Jordan points out, Jordan was there that day, Trace, and said he did everything he could not to make eye contact, as you had instructed, that if you came out. He said he did everything he could not to make eye contact with you. Your body double, forgive me, actually brought a few friends along. It was nice to see, Jim and Richard from Indian Hill and he, Richard from Indian Hill. I don't know if you saw the segment with my dad today, okay? And there was a big story yesterday that Jim Bowden, the former general manager of the Reds, had a conversation with Nick Kroll, and that Jim Bowden said Kroll told him that he would prefer for Joey Votto to finish his career in this, the final year of his 10-year contract as a Red. But that if Votto came to him and asked him for a trade to the Toronto Blue Jays, Joey's hometown, that Nick would do everything he could to make that happen. Does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, it does, because haven't we talked about this before? I mean, just in general, in Cincinnati, there's no market for Joey Votto, not at $25 million. So, I mean, I think they've tried to move Joey Votto in the past, and they weren't able to do that. So, I mean, that's a nice gesture by the Reds, but I don't think there's going to be a taker. And Joey Votto, he's still banged up a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's coming along. I mean, whether he'll be ready or not for opening day, I don't think anybody knows for sure yet. But at least he's playing in games, and you got, 8-9 more games left.
Yeah. Votto, to me, and we've talked about this as well, he's the greatest Reds hitter of all time. And if you don't look at his numbers, I'm talking about everything, he was incredible. Had some injuries, but he's a very, very good ball player. Injuries. And speaking of injuries, a guy we don't bring up.
I'm going to correct you real quick on this because I agreed with you when you said this before. And the more I went back and looked at it, I think Joey Votto is the best guy in the history of the franchise getting on base. And that can't even be debated. There is no way at the end of the day, if you had to have a base hit, that you would pick Votto over Pete Rose. A base hit.
What about a base hit with a runner on second base?
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying if you had to bet money, and I'm not a gambler, Casey is, Paul is, everybody around here has their vices. Lord knows I have more than a couple, all right? But if I were placed, okay, and look, I don't want to hear about left-handed batter against left-handed pitcher. I don't want to hear any of that. Pete Rose was a switch hitter, okay? If I had to bet big money on not drawing a walk, Votto's a great hitter. I'm not disagreeing with that. But when people say the best hitter in the history of the franchise, I'm not buying it. It's Rose.
Thom, you're talking about a singles hitter. You're not talking about a guy that hits home runs.
I'm talking about a base hit. You said
I would have
hitter. Votto has more power than Rose. Votto doesn't have as many doubles as Rose. So it's not just singles. I'm not even sure that Votto has as many runs batted in as Rose. Now, Rose has played a lot longer than Votto, so that's an unfair comparison. But I'm just saying, I'm getting off topic now. I'm just saying I agreed with you initially when you made that comment a few weeks back. I think if I had to bet a lot of money on one guy getting on base, I would bet on Votto. If I had to bet on one guy getting me just a base hit, I'm betting on Rose.
Okay, you make a great point. Pete Rose is a better leadoff hitter than Joey Votto. Okay, Thom, let's say you're general manager, okay? And for the next 10 years, you have to make a decision on your first baseman. Is it Joey Votto for those 10 years, peak Joey Votto, or peak Pete Rose for 10 years? Who do you take?
That's a very good question. I think
it's a great question.
I think it's a great question. I think that there clearly are strengths and weaknesses to each player's game. Rose is a much more versatile player. So you asked me to sign him as a first baseman. If we're talking about both of them in their 20s, Okay? Rose is a much more versatile player. No debate about it. In his career, he played second, he played third, he played left, he played first. He can play anywhere. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Big deal.
It's a really big deal. It's a really big deal, especially as you're talking about assembling a team. Because if all of a sudden you've got some phenom, let's use this Encarnacion Strand kid, right, who's not going to cover off the ball in Arizona.
Yeah.
Apparently he can't play third base well enough to play him down there. He'd be with a big league club maybe right now. Okay? They think his long-term position is at first base. Votto couldn't play anywhere else but first base. So
that's true.
If all of a sudden I got a kid coming up, right, and I can play him at first base because my first baseman can move, well, then that's a big deal for assembling my team over the next 10 years, right?
That's a really good point, because what I think is, besides him just getting all those hits every single year, the fact that he was a left fielder and moved to third base because you had to put George Foster in left, and he played third base. It's like, oh, it's just, this is not whole baseball, people. Third base is a tough position. And Pete's, yeah, I'll play third base. Yeah, not a problem. That's a problem with a lot of guys. You know, when they talked about moving Jeter to third base or Barry Larkin to second base, both those guys said, I'm not moving. And they didn't move. You know, they wanted to move. Yankees wanted to move Jeter. Reds wanted to move Larkin. And he said no. So for Pete to do that, I think says a lot about Pete, but to play right field, left field, second base, I mean, everything but shortstop, he'd be a good catcher, shortstop and center field. I mean, that's the thing that people do not talk about Pete enough about.
Well, so then, back to you asking the question about which guy am I going to take. I mean, if you're talking about a guy who's just going to be planted in one position and that's where he is forever, he's going to put up great numbers. The other thing I look about, Tracy, and it's not a knock on anybody because stuff happens, and that's injuries. Rose played every day for 20 years. I mean, I know when I'm signing him, and you don't know when you sign any player, but the old adage about the best part of ability is availability, right?
Well, 90% of success is just showing up. Right?
Who would you sign?
There. I mean,
who would you sign? You asked me the question. Let me turn it around and ask you.
For 10 years, I signed Joey Votto. I do. Okay. It's not taking anything away from Pete. Well, what are the JOs, the Ham and Eggers? What do they think? Do they have an opinion, or they got their mouth shut?
Well, they're just over there both slouching. I think they both didn't get enough sleep last night. Paul's been watching college basketball morning, noon, and night. I don't know what Casey's been doing morning, noon, and night. I mean, he is still engaged. He's not married yet. So what he's doing morning, noon, and night will be very different now than it is starting in June.
Gee, you're so funny. That's exactly right. Boy, when I was dating, boy, it was on, right? You get married, you win the prize, and you just kind of phone it in, don't you, Thom?
Shut her down. That's my language. It's just like TSA at Newark Airport on Thanksgiving weekend. Busiest travel weekend of the year. TSA in Newark, 5 o'clock on a Sunday. Shut her down. Shut her down.
What do you think you're doing, Trace?
All right.
Right?
Casey, you want to answer that question? Votto or Rose for 10 years? Now, you're not a big baseball guy, as Jerry Nairn used to say. You're becoming a baseball guy.
Yeah, if I were to choose between the two, I mean, I'm just going to quote Nick Kirby here. He says that the difference between their average is .006 between Rose and Votto.
Nice, Kirby.
Yep.
Nice, Kirby.
I don't know if it really matters except for the leadership. And I would think that Rose was probably a better leader than Votto was. Am I wrong in saying that, or?
Oh, jeez. Casey, I'm going to say something else, too, to you. And you really need to write this down. Brevity is the soul of wit. So you need to keep your answers short and to the point, right? That is, don't throw that that crap out about leadership. That is so overrated. You know what leadership is? A guy that plays every day. That's your argument with Pete. I mean, Pete played every day and put up numbers, but both those guys, you look at their numbers, pretty strong. I think Joey Votto overall has stronger numbers.
Paul, you want to weigh in on this?
I mean, yeah. If you're giving if you're giving me a decision between the two, I'm going to take Joey Votto. If you're giving me a decision,
that boy.
Yeah, I'm taking Joey. Yeah, I mean, I know Pete racked up the hits and everything, but I'm taking Joey as a better overall hitter, more valuable overall hitter. That's what I'll go with.
Okay. This is 22. Back it up 10. Let's go to 12. Okay. If you talk about availability, and you can't put up numbers unless you're on the field, okay? Since Votto signed the contract, and again, I'm not knocking anybody. People get hurt. And this most recent injury for Votto's was very serious, and he played through it for Lord knows how long, okay? Yeah. But since he signed the deal, okay, 111 games. Then he played 162. 62 games. Then he played 158, 162, 145, 142. Okay. 2 years ago, he plays 129. Okay, you got to take out the COVID year, and then last year he gets hurt. He plays 91. So since he signed that contract, you've had 1, 2, 3, 4 years where he played fewer than 130 games. 4 of the 10 played fewer than 130. Rose, let's just go back to, say, his 5th year once he became a regular player. Starting in 69.
Okay.
156, 159, 160. Led the league, 154, 160, 163 led the league, 162 led the league, 162 led the league, 162 led the league, 159, 163, 162. He never missed a game.
Okay,
so I'm just saying, if you're going to pick one guy or the other, I get all the stuff with Votto. The on-base percentage, Kirby points out the batting average, all that kind of stuff is fine. Dig into all the numbers you want. One guy played every day. He never got hurt.
He never got hurt. That's right. But your point, you see, you get off topic here, Tom. You make a good point, and then you start to just get too carried away. The point is...
Too carried away? I just gave numbers for you. The guy never played in less than 158 games over 12 years. Votto played in every game twice, which in this day and age is unheard of. I'll grant you that. But, I mean, come on. How can you produce if you're not on the field?
So far, Tom, Casey said Votto. Paul, who knows a lot about a lot of things, he said Votto. And then you have the baseball expert, that's Tracy Jones. He says Votto. So it's 3 against 1, Tom. And I'd like to bring your dad into this conversation as well. Because you know he'd be all over Votto. Well, maybe not.
Well, I don't know either. I mean, a lot of the fans on our thing, on our chat, you know, they're going back and forth just like we are a little bit. Okay. All right. I guess I'm getting too carried away, according to AJ and Tracy Jones. Anything off topic on your mind these days?
You know what? And this was a topic that we brought up a few weeks ago. Did you see where Trevor Bauer signed with a Japanese team, I think for $10 million? This is a crazy story that no one's talking about. One of the best pitchers in all of baseball can't get a job with the other 30 teams. I think is a crying shame. I think it's an outrage. He was not convicted of a crime, right? Compare that to Deshaun Watson and what he did to those women, right? And he's quarterbacking an NFL team.
Well, you
I
know,
just think what happened.
but if you want to go technically speaking, you are 100% on Bauer. In fact, his case did not even go to trial. They threw it out before it ever went there, and he settled in whatever he did. And Deshaun Watson ultimately settled. He was not charged with a crime. He was suspended for. He missed the first, 8 games of this season, if I'm not mistaken. But that's half of an NFL season. Trevor Bauer's original suspension would have covered basically 2 full seasons of Major League Baseball had a judge not stepped in and cut it way down, which made him a free agent. And you're right, no team will sign him.
Here's my point in bringing this up. Isn't it amazing in society nowadays that some people are given a pass, right? They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want and don't have really the same repercussions as other people. Trevor Bauer, a Thom Brennaman, a 3-letter word. I'm serious, Tom. That's an outrage, right? You've paid the price. Let's move it along a little bit, right? Some people have done worse than you, Tom, right? They didn't, they weren't blackballed. So I find it unfair in Trevor Bauer, like I find it unfair with you, Tom.
Well, the Trevor Bauer thing is, I think, Tracy, what's going to be interesting here, and look, I'm not smart enough to follow and know if there's some kind of I have to believe Bauer's a smart enough guy, but maybe he didn't have the leverage where if, he said to the team in Japan, hey, look, I'll come over there, but if a Major League Baseball team comes along and wants to sign me, you have to give me the right to at least negotiate and see if I can't go do it. I would not be surprised if a Major League team, you get halfway through this season, Bauer's over there pitching. He hadn't pitched in 2 years. He's over there pitching, and he's doing great. Somebody's going to scoop him up, though, don't you think?
I would think so. Tom, let me throw this at you. If you're the general manager, now you already botched up the Pete Rose Votto thing. Let's not make another mistake here. Would you have signed Trevor Bauer to start the season? Would you have signed him I would have too.
I would have.
Without a doubt, right?
Well, I mean, look, I think you have to go to your fan base and you have to be honest with them. And Bauer is savvy enough as a guy in a press conference where he can hold his own. Okay?
Right.
It's just like me. People want to interview me and talk to me about it. It's all out there right on the line. What I said, what happened, all that kind of stuff. I'm happy to talk about it. Okay?
Yes.
And I think Bauer would be able to handle that situation, and he would do the best he could. The franchise would do the best they could to lay it out there. They could have set up some kind of charitable endeavor, whether it's to this group, battered women, whether it's to, whatever it might be, where you could have – and look, some would say that's a PR stunt. You know what? Sometimes you have to do some things like that to maybe win over or massage some of your fan base depending on certain situations. I would have thought long and hard about it. Would you have signed him, Paul, yay or nay?
I think at this point, probably. I honestly, though, like you said, I mean, he seems like a guy that stayed in good enough shape. He doesn't seem like somebody that would just take the time off. To be completely transparent, really haven't followed. I've never really liked the guy.
Yeah, I haven't either. I don't like him either.
Like I loved his vlogs during COVID when he did those behind the scenes vlogs and took everybody through the COVID season. I watched every one of those. I thought that was incredible content. I thought it was really interesting how all the players were handling like the COVID tests and all that stuff, and especially too because that was his Cy Young year with the Reds, so it was a little more personal here and knowing when he would do vlogs around the city and stuff like that. Like, I think it was easier to connect with it because it was Cincinnati. But I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on him just as in general and an opinion of it. If he was good enough to pitch, though, and he's been cleared and the teams have done their due diligence on him, go out and sign him. I mean, he won a Cy Young 3 years ago, so.
AC, yay or nay? You sign him or not?
I mean, I would have.
Uh-oh.
I think I would have signed him, but I understand why the Reds didn't. Why would they want another PR headache?
No, we're just saying any team. Any team.
Oh,
like does he deserve to be back in the game? Basically, is what
yes, a second chance.
I have to tell you, though, Tracy, I really believe Paul, and then I'm gonna let you go. I think Paul said something that. Listen, you know as well as I know. Okay, because of restrictions that, say, a government investigation is able to do on somebody, or the FBI or the police, okay? There are laws that govern some of the things that they can do as far as an investigation is concerned. The private investigators that the NFL and Major League Baseball go out and hire, they're not limited to those same kinds of things. And
Good point.
They oftentimes are able to do an even better job sometimes in law enforcement. I got to believe there's something out there that there had to be a couple of teams that went out there and did their quote-unquote due diligence on Bauer that says to them, "Ooh, this might not quite be over yet."
Yeah. See, all I hear about is the rough sex. You know, the girl wanted rough sex, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what that all entails. I mean, I know what it entails with Danae, handcuffs, blindfold, things like that. But I don't know what Trevor Bauer meant or the girl meant by that. Do you? How about Casey? Casey, you know anything about that rough sex? Paul?
No, I do not.
Okay. That's where
Thom?
we're going to let Tracy go now at this point in time. Tracy, we will see you on Thursday. Thank you for your time and all your insight. Per usual, young man, have a great rest of your day.
I'll see you, boys. Take it easy.
Tracer, that's 30 minutes of TV, boys. Tracer.
See you, Tracy.
All right, before we go, do we have a UDF cherry on top?
Thom, we do, and this one is special. It is near and dear to our hearts.
It is?
It is very special. Yes, it is.
I think everyone's going to get a kick out of this.
So we have come to know this very closely and intimately. This is Zoltan Mesko. This is the man who held the ball in the Michigan game. And guess what company he works for, Thom?
Snowflake.
Snowflake.
Now, you're talking about Mesko. When we run that video clip before some of the shows of when I was calling the Appalachian State upset of Michigan and that final try by Michigan to win the game on a field goal, it's out of the hold of Mesko. That is Zoltan Mesko.
That is him.
Was he not the punter of that team, too?
Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah.
So
he's in Ohio.
He is, yeah. We should get him on the show.
You know what? I'd love to get him on the show.
Let's get him on the show.
Zoltan Mesko, a real Michigan man.
He probably has no idea that our little fan base.
I mean, every single day. I don't know. It obviously doesn't come through on the air because the sound from the intro is overtaking our microphones. But every single day when that App State one runs, we're all sitting in here going, out of the hold of Mesko. We love it.
Exactly right.
It's a running joke here.
He was an outstanding punter with Zoltan Mesko. He's in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. You know, all of you people who beat down Cleveland all the time. There's another example, and I'm not one of those people. There's another example on one of the most spectacularly beautiful suburbs in the United States of America.
Chagrin Falls?
Chagrin Falls, Ohio. That is a big league neighborhood.
One other thing, since we're not doing Not Too Picky today, we got to run out to Miami to do a baseball game this afternoon. But the USA is minus 134 on Betfred for the World Baseball Classic tonight. They are plus 113 on the run line at minus 1.5. So a couple of things to look at. I mean, this could end up being one of, if not the most watched baseball games of all time. Did you see that?
We'll see.
See that clip?
We'll see.
It'll be on Fox. Is that right?
FS1.
On FS1.
7P.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Have a great day. Case, Paul.
Until tomorrow.
To all of you, we thank you for joining us on Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.